Hey guys, Paul here. Welcome to RDTV. Thanks for tuning in. And today we're doing a token drive with the new DLC, upcoming DLC should I say, the RaceRoom Racing Experience, the GT4 category of cars that are coming to the sim this November 28th. Now you may have seen our live stream interview with the developers of Sector 3 Studios, JF Chardon and Alex Hodgkinson, where we spoke in depth about the GT4 pack, the new physics updates that are arriving to the sim across a number of different categories of car, and of course the new tyre model that's applied to the GT4s that you'll be receiving as DLC, paid DLC might I add, at the end of November. Now, we spoke all things RaceRoom Racing Experience during that interview while driving a selection of these cars and a few other different ones, but I wanted now to give my personal opinion from a gamer sim racer point of view of what the cars feel like when you're behind the virtual wheel. So, we've decided to pick the Brands Hatch Indy circuit just to add yet more pressure on JF and the team that we want the Grand Prix version of this track, people. So come on, get licensing, get building. Now, first car, back on topic. We're going to drive the Lotus Evora GT4. First Lotus in RaceRoom, of course, so that's very exciting to get the brand. JF spoke a little about how that came about with this team, the Lotus Cyan Racing team. Obviously based very close to Sector 3 in Sweden, and they worked very closely with Cyan Racing to bring the Lotus Evora GT4 to the sim. But there are a number of other different liveries available, so you can see them here: 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different liveries. We've got a few big names. We've got Phil Glue, who does a bit of British touring car commentary, also a former Renault Clio Cup UK champion. For you guys that'll recognise him. Takuma Sato, of Formula 1 fame as well. Koreuser, big Dutchman, big known, and not big physically, but big name, well known, been around for a long time in endurance racing as well. So we're going to pick, what car shall we pick? We're going to pick the number 77, because that's a pretty looking car. As I say, we're going to do Brands Hatch Indy, 22 opponents, 102% AI difficulty. We're not going to bother with qualifying, we're just going to go straight in to a 20-minute race from a standing start. So that'll no doubt put us 6th on the grid, as usual. And we're going to talk about what the Lotus Evora GT4 upcoming DLC in RaceRoom Racing Experience feels like from a sim racer's perspective. You've already had all the information about the physics and the spreadsheets and all the detail that's gone into it, but now, arguably, the most important side of it is, what's it feel like in my gloved hands using my pretending steering wheel and pedal set that I've got attached to my pretending race car cockpit in my man cave, like most of us here probably do as well. So yeah, I'm going to cut now and then we'll go straight to the track and we'll do some racing. See you in a minute. Welcome back, we're trackside, so let's go virtual motor racing in the Lotus Evora GT4. Right. As you can see, there's some lovely liveries. I'll just flick through them real quick. The liveries of the cars that are on the grid. We're there, number 6. So, nice livery set on the Cayman, the KTM Expo GT4, and of course the Evora that we're driving today. So, there you go. Real quick, it's a 22 car grid, 23 car grid even, because we're in it now. So, let's go racing. Right, here we go. These cars quite low powered, so require a little bit off the line, which we shall give it full beans. And that is what I call good start, people. Happy with that one. Into Graham Hill Bend, we'll just loiter around the outside so we can have the inside into the hairpin and try and get past that KTM. Now these cars, the GT4 cars, are the little baby brother to the big GT3s that we all seem to be going crazy for in sim racing at the moment, and driving in pretty much every sim that's out there. So they've got some good performance, but they're not quite as fast as their big brother. But importantly, they're a little bit more stable. They're a a little bit more pliable, you can throw them about and they'll be a little bit more sensible and sure-footed than the bigger GT3 counterparts, and that makes for good racing. So these, I highly suspect, will be a popular online choice when they come out for R3E at the end of this month, and they'll be popular amongst a very different or a broader skill set and experience set of drivers that race this title on and offline. So as I say, they're a little bit more forgiving than the GT3 cars, yet still offer a fair amount of speed, and there's still an enjoyable driving experience. I've always been a bit of a fan of the RaceRoom Racing Experience force feedback. For years now, I've always liked it. Force feedback is a very subjective thing to talk about in sim racers. What's one man's gold is another man's garbage, of course. But I've always quite liked the balance they've done, and I think since they've taken Alex on board to do the physics, because obviously physics has a direct relationship with force feedback as well, and they've done some tweaks to the force feedback code over the years, it's really begun to shine. And I think the GT4 cars in which we're driving now, coupled with the latest physics sets and the new tyre model, to which Alex spoke about substantially in our interview last night, really deliver an excellent force feedback now. It's really talkative. This car, I can feel what it's doing underneath me a lot. Now that's helped, of course, by a slightly slower speed than you would experience in a GT3, GT2 or a GT1 or a Formula car, but I can really now sort of feel what the car's doing, the way it connects. I mean, it's always had a good connection to the road in RaceRoom Racing Experience, in my opinion, but now it feels like they've just got another level compared to what we had before, and that really gives me, should I say, more confidence in what the car's doing underneath me, both in terms of what the tyres are doing, where they're flexing, where they're losing grip with the road, and also the little nuance things, the bits of understeer now come through a little bit more consistently. They feel as though they come through a little bit more consistently, a little bit cleaner and a little bit more defined than has been the case previously. And that is a good thing, obviously, because that's our only real contact with what's going on out on the racetrack from behind our seat. We don't have the feel of the pants through the backside that real racing drivers tend to rely on. So we have to go through what the force feedback in our hands is telling us, unless we're fortunate enough to have a high-end motion platform setup, in which case that does replicate it to a degree, but that'll never be a substitute for G-forces on the body and actually having your backside a few millimetres off of the tarmac. So I think the balance now that's been struck with the GT4 DLC, and that's not just in this Lotus that we're driving now, that's across the board in all three cars, is a real big positive. If I remember correctly, the new tyre model and physics have also been applied to the GT2 category in the game, but I've not yet had an opportunity to spend any time behind the wheel of that one to make any kind of judgment call on how that's reflected with those cars. So I can only speak of the GT4s that we're driving now, and frankly I'm loving it. I'm up to this point in time, my favourite category in R3E is the TCR, WTCR 2018 class, which also is one of the more recent inclusions to the title. I like touring cars, I like the WTCR anyway, so that's a good starting point for me. But I also think the feel of the cars has been very well translated in RaceRoom. They're front-wheel drive cars, of course. These are rear-wheel drive, so from the very off, that gives you a very different experience. But I think the GT4s of now pretty much, in my personal tastes and opinion, caught up and overtaken that category as a personal favourite of mine. And as I said earlier at the beginning of this video, I do genuinely believe these will become a hit in online racing because of the pleasantness that they offer to drive, but still engaging and exciting enough for the aliens out there to push it to the very nth degree for those final tens. But it's compliant enough in its behaviour with us, those of us who are less skilled or less experienced, to still get in, have themselves a really good, realistic feeling experience, but keep the car on the track and have enough capacity left to concentrate on the racing itself rather than trying to hang on to the car around the circuit by its coattails. And that's no bad thing in a spirit of inclusivity when we want as many people as we can really to discover, enjoy and actively participate in our hobby that is sim racing. And of course as well, the real life series, the real life GT4 series, is something of a feeder to the bigger categories, the GT3s of this world and the World Endurance Championship. And as such, GT4 across the globe is populated, much like GT3, with a mix of young up-and-coming racing drivers, seasoned professionals and well-heeled amateurs. So again, like the GT3 category, GT4 has been designed as a series to be accessible to very different kinds of driver abilities, and that feels like it's been replicated really well in RaceRoom Racing Experience with these new cars. Now, while we're loosely speaking about personal opinions, which one's my favourite, I hear you say, and why? Well, for me it's got to be the Lotus. I'm a Lotus fan anyway, always like Lotus cars, and the Evora GT4 out of the three, and I must stress all three cars have a very different handling and performance characteristics. We touched upon this during the live stream with Alex about the BOP, the facts and figures that actually go behind the cars, the performance of the real world ones. They have very different engine configurations, very different performance, horsepower, stats and characteristics, and very different weights as well, and aerodynamic capabilities. But the Lotus Evora for me is probably, in my humble opinion, the raciest of the three cars. It feels quite agile, quite nimble. It feels like it stood up on its tiptoes a little bit more than the other two. But at the same time, it's not got the nervousness, shall we say, of the Porsche Cayman. And it's not got the flatness and smoothness of the KTM Expo. So it's a little bit alive under your wheels, but it's alive in the right way. It's a well-balanced car, as one would expect from a Lotus. They've made their name and reputation by producing well-balanced racing and road cars for years now, since the time of Colin Chapman and his very successful Grand Prix team. And this one, again, is no exception to that rule. It sounds the business, but with Anthony Montreal doing the sounds, they always do sound pretty much as close to perfection as you could ask for. But it's the feeling that the car gives me. And when I say feeling, I'm not speaking of force feedback here. I'm not speaking of the way the physics have been interpreted. I'm not talking about the gamey aspects, but the actual car itself, the way the car, or the way Sector 3 and Alex and his team have represented the car. in the sim compared to the real world one is what excites me most. I love the Evora. I think it's a very, very enjoyable racing car that gives me confidence that it'll do what I want it to do, when I want it to do it, and how I want it to do it. And this is definitely the car that I would pick from a smiles point of view. Should I ever find the time, ha ha ha, to do any kind of organised online racing. It's a beautifully well put together machine, really smartly done, so congratulations to the guys and girls at Sector 3 for what they've managed to achieve. Well, I've got the inside at last, and I will have that final place on the rostrum from you, young man. But yeah, it feels really nice. And it actually leads me on nicely to talking about the pack in more general terms, which is something I'm going to try and stray away from talking about the pack in its entirety, because I'm intending to do, this is the first video talk and drive I've recorded for these cars, and I'm intending to do one for each, so I don't want to take away some of my discussion points for future cars. But all three of these GT4s feel very, very different. They're all very different engineering principles. They've all got very different characteristics. Of course, as Alex mentioned during our interview yesterday, this, when I say yesterday, I mean the 23rd of November, depending on how quickly I manage to edit this and get it up live. As Alex mentioned in our interview on the 23rd, this Lotus Evora GT4 is based on the Scandinavian GT4 Championship, so the Swedish GT. And as such comes with some slight differences to the specification of other categories of car that race in other different GT4 categories, because of course the GT4 series is a global rule set, much like GT3, much like TCR touring cars, so there are national and international championships aplenty dotted around the world, and this one's the Scandinavian version. Now, frankly, I can't remember what Alex said are the slight nuances to this car compared to other specifications that race in different series, but I can say whatever it is sweet. It's a very, very nice car. Now, again, harking back to the interview, we spoke about the development process and the BOP, which is balance of performance, for those of you that maybe are not overly aware of these different acronyms. And all four of these GT4s, all three, excuse me, of these GT4s in RaceRoom have gone through considerable amounts of BOP prior to getting to this point where they're almost release ready. Now, what that entailed is both looking at the specifications of the real world BOP series and then just basically countless hours of testing from the intrepid beta testing team over at Sector 3, setting the ultimate lap time and then seeing how close the cars can get to that lap time until they meet a reasonable compromise in terms of how closely managed all three cars in the class are together. It's a tried and tested method. It's applied to any category that sports a BOP over the top of it. So WTCR again would have been the same and would have undergone the same kind of rigour, but also they've had to take into consideration what effects that would have on fuel consumption and tyre life, because of course, unlike the WTCR cars that we spoke about, these are GT cars, GT category, and as such they're highly likely to form part of a longer distance race than the traditional sprint events that touring car racing tends to run at. So it's not an easy task, and they've done a very nice job of Sector 3 and their team of beta testers and everybody involved in the BOP. Each car has its own unique characteristics, has its own strengths and weaknesses. I found from my running in the car, and that was backed up by JF and Alex in our interview on the 23rd, I found that, for example, the Porsche Cayman seems to be a quicker car in a straight line. The KTM Expo that's behind us at the moment, that's P3 in this particular race, seems to be particularly good in the corners, but struggles a little bit with its turbo engine in bogging down, so it's not got quite the immediate power demand that you would expect from a normally aspirated non-turbo engine as we've got here. And then this one seems to be, the Lotus Evora that I'm in now, just seems to be the good all-rounder. It's well balanced, it's good in the corners, it's not too bad in terms of the horses and its push down the straights. So they've all got different characteristics, and depending on the type of circuit in which you drive them, will give you a very different result, or pecking order, so to speak. So now I'm P2, the guy in front's also in a Lotus in P1, so it looks like the Brands Hatch Indy circuit, the Lotus Evora is the car of choice in this category. But then I dare say you go to somewhere with long straights, let's say a Monza or somewhere along those lines, then you'd want it to be driving the Cayman and its additional straight line speed advantage that it has over these cars would be the telling factor. So again, that's really well done, and that's one of the many reasons why I prefer multiple cars in a category to the single cup status of something like, let's say, the Porsche GT3 Carrera Cup car, because you've got that element of difference and variety and jeopardy in there. That opens up the potential for strategy, and over the course of a season sometimes you'll have to take it on the chin and enter damage limitation mode. Sometimes you'll have to make hay while the sun shines if the car and track are in perfect harmony and you've got a good setup on, and you've got to strive for big results for putting it in your back pocket against when you're not having quite as competitive of a weekend. And then throwing into that is the inclusion in the upcoming patch of the new tyres. So the new tyre model now comes in two different compounds. You've got a soft and a hard, I believe it is. I forget now the exact timings of those, but the soft is good for a significantly shorter duration of time than the hard tyre is, which again brings up with it the alteration in strategy options that you have. Do you run short and fast, or do you go a bit longer on the slower tyre? And also on tyres, strategies and pit stop topic, Alex mentioned, and frankly I didn't probe him enough on this one, so I'm apologies for that one. I got caught out by not asking for more detail. But in RaceRoom they've now looked to, in the new patch, adopt different pit stop times and rules and regs depending on the kind of car and category of car in which you are. Oh, that's an aggressive defence. Category of car in which you're racing. So in some categories you can do 2 wheels, 4 people at a time. Some categories you can do 1 person, 1 wheel, and that's been brought in to RaceRoom Racing Experience to add another element of realism to the title that's been lacking for a while now, and will make a welcome addition. Oh, little hip and shoulder there just to tell me he's there. Final lap as well, that's why he's getting aggressive. I've been too busy yakking and I'm not concentrating on what's happening in front of me, and I'm too far back now to make a last. Oh, I'm not, I can do it. Nope, too far back. P3 will take that. So yeah, this has been my favourite, my personal favourite of the upcoming GT4 DLC pack for RaceRoom Racing Experience. It's the Lotus Evora GT4, and I think it's a beautiful car. It's not as often seen in GT4 racing in the real world now as it used to be. It's coming to the end of its useful life in top level categories of GT4 racing, but it's still a very well sorted, enjoyable and beautiful car, and hey, it's a Lotus, what's not to like? So yeah, that's been our token drive number 1 of 3 of the RaceRoom Racing Experience GT4 DLC that's due to drop on the 28th of November 2018 for R3E. So you've been watching me, Paul Jeffrey, on RDTV, here on Twitch and also on YouTube. Do me a real big favour, give us a like, a subscribe, a follow, or whatever it is that you call these things. Show your appreciation for what we do, that'd be really, really appreciated. I hope you've enjoyed the video, I hope it's been a little bit insightful and it's whet the appetite somewhat prior to getting your hands on this yourself if you are so inclined to purchase this DLC. And yeah, until next time, so race is awesome, people. Catch you later. Bye bye.